It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
Okay, so we make it out of our 20s, we make it out of the beginning of our careers, the foundation of our financial lives, and now we get into our 30s and we're starting to gain traction. We're getting into that messy middle, and surely we are older and we are wiser. So at this point, we've likely got it all figured out as it relates to debt. Right?
Well, here, let's talk about the positives, and then I'll talk about that messy stuff you're talking about. The positives are, in your 30s, you're starting to have some career advancement. You've probably gotten quite a few pay raises at this point. But here's what kind of starts pulling at your back pocket and your purse is that this is the age, the decade that you buy your first house.
Yep.
This is the decade that you start growing a family. Yep. Neither one of those things are cheap.
Nope.
Or easy to afford. So these are the traps that a lot of people fall into, and the data shows it because in pretty much all categories, debt goes up from Gen Z to the millennials.
Yeah, when we look at it, the average millennial, and this is from age 25 to age 40, they carry auto debt of a little over $18,000. Their credit card has now doubled to $4,600 as opposed to $2,200 for the Gen Zers. Their mortgage has also increased to $232,000, and their student loans have actually increased to $35,000. Just like you said, Brian, every single category increased from Gen Z into the 30s. That's not a positive trend. We should not see debt increasing.
Well, we hear about the saying of keeping up with the Joneses, you know, and in high school, you know how it's the haves versus the have-nots. And if you went to the same public schools like I did, where you feel like as you get into adulting that this stuff's going to change. And unfortunately, it doesn't. Right. It just feels like, you know, what neighborhood you live in, what car you drive in. All this stuff still plays out even as you're an adult. And I'm just telling you, don't participate in these games. And that's the problem I see with the typical American is you do fall in these consumption traps and you're not making anybody happy. And all you're doing is digging yourself into that hole that you will eventually have to pay off before you can start investing money for yourself.
Yeah, I think that's what the biggest hang-up actually becomes for folks in their 30s. Where folks in our 20s, it was student loans and the thing that we couldn't avoid. Now it is that lifestyle creep. It is credit card debt, the ability to live beyond our means, the ability to go put stuff on layaway that I'm going to have and enjoy and consume now and pay for later. That is a dangerous, dangerous, dangerous trap to fall into.
Well, with credit cards, I just talked to my 20-year-olds, and look, I would be very much a hypocrite if I didn't tell you that in my early 20s, right out of college, I struggled with how much adult life costs and ran afoul of credit cards for a brief period of time. And I think that's pretty common. Even in our millionaire surveys, we have found that people struggle. But if you're in your 30s and you have credit card debt, guys, you're not on the path to wealth creation because this is an understandable mistake when you're in your early 20s and you're trying to get your firm footing. But if you struggle with credit card debt in your 30s, it's no longer a cautionary tale. I'm telling you, you're in no-go land and you're never going to reach your goals unless you get this under control yesterday.
And I have friends all the time that say, but Bo, I've been planning that vacation. If I don't put it on my credit card, I can't go. The cold water is if you can't afford to do or to buy without utilizing the credit card, I'm going to argue that you can't afford it and you should probably avoid it.
Don't fake your life. Don't carry a balance. Do it right so your future self will thank you tremendously. And that leads to kind of the biggest expense that you'll have, which is mortgage debt. And I think that this is one we talked about. The average first-time home buyer is in their early 30s. So this is a lot of you are going to walk into this opportunity, and interest rates are super low right now. You're going to feel tempted to really push the envelope on what you can afford. I'm definitely telling you, be careful with this much debt.
Yeah, you know, and it's still one of those things, you know, you've always heard about the American dream, and people think that, okay, well, that's shifting. Maybe now we live in a more digital, more fluid, less concentrated, nailed-down society. But even in a recent study, they found that 75% of non-homeowners still say that owning a home is part of the American dream. It's still something that a lot of folks are going to try to do, that a lot of folks want to get into. So if the majority of us are going to buy a house, if the majority of us want to have some level of home ownership, there probably ought to be some tried and true rules to help us stay in between the lines.
Well, I know you and Reby, I was out of town, and you actually covered this. So, Bo, walk them through. What is the checklist or what are the things y'all came up with that a 30-something ought to consider when buying a house?
Before you ever buy a house, there's a few things that you should know. One, you should answer the question, will I be able to be in this house for 5 to 7 years? A real estate purchase is an illiquid purchase. It's not something you're just going to buy and bebop in and out of. You need to make sure you have some longevity there. So if you think your family situation might be changing, or your job might be changing, or your geography might be changing, home ownership might not be for you. It needs to be a long-term decision. The second thing we would say, and this is a little different than the common financial knowledge out there, is for first-time home buyers, we don't say that you have to put 20% down. Yes, that's great. Yes, that's an ideal. But in a lot of places in this country, it's difficult for young folks to come up with a 20% down payment. So we are willing to give you some leeway on your first home purchase. It doesn't necessarily have to be 20% down.
I see an asterisk there, though. What's that asterisk telling everybody?
This is only for your first-time home purchase. If you're buying your second, third, fourth home, or if you're upgrading, you got to still stick to the 20%. It's okay to stretch a little bit for the first one. You cannot stretch as you continue to move along. And then here's the big one. This is the one to really make sure that you stay inside of the guardrails. Is the total monthly cost of your housing less than 25% of your gross income? If it's not, you probably have too much house, you have too much housing, it's something you need to reevaluate. Or when you're looking at how much the house is going to cost, if it trips over that 25% wire, your spidey sense should start going off.
Well, and look, we give you some flexibility, some grace on that down payment on your first house. We also give you a little flexibility for that house that you're buying in your 30s to do a 30-year mortgage, because I know a lot of you are going to have the challenge of, should I do a 15-year, should I do a 30-year mortgage? Look, there are a ton of things pulling at your wallet in your 30s. Like I said, we have the family, we have all kind of commitments that you have. So I'm willing to give you the opportunity. Do the 30-year mortgage because it gives you the payment flexibility with a lower monthly payments, and so much is pulling off of your monthly cash flow.
Yep.
But it also allows you to continue to invest through those very powerful years. Remember, every dollar you have in your 30s is super powerful. You want to have that money working in your army of dollar bills so you can get that compounding growth and really create the best version of yourself financially.
And now, Brian, you already mentioned this. One of the things that is happening in our 30s is we're starting to have a little more jingle. We're starting to have a little more discretionary income. So one of the things that we can do is increase our lifestyle. That's one of the benefits of being able to do that. Well, the third struggle, tripping block, hang up that we see that happens so often in the 30s does in fact involve the thing that's supposed to get you from A to B.
Well, everybody, because most people don't see your house. I mean, your coworkers don't see your house. People at the stoplight don't see your house, but they see your car.
Absolutely.
So I think that people inappropriately look at this as their first flex.
That's
when
right.
they want to a themselves for a good education, for sacrificing when they're younger, it manifests itself somehow into the car. But you know what's sad about that? The car is one of the worst financial things you can do. It's even surprising we get to call cars assets because they're highly depreciating. They cost money to keep them up through maintenance as well as fuel, as well as you have to have a place to park them at night. And then you stack on top of that just the day you drive it off of, whether you buy it from a private party, it's less severe if you buy it from, used, but whether it's used or new, there will be some form of depreciation in your future, and it's not good. Whereas we like appreciating assets, not assets that are losing value while you're using them.
And the fact of the matter is, though, we do likely have to have a car. There was a study done by Experian recently that found that the average auto debt for millennials, for these folks in that 25 to 40 range, is about $18,000. So buying a car is something we're likely going to have to do. Maybe we need more reliable transportation to get us to and from work, or we have a family and we want safety, and we're going to have to make that purchase. Maybe it's not because we're trying to reward ourselves or we're trying to expand lifestyle. So if we're going to have to make that purchase, just like when we made the mortgage or the house purchase, there are probably some rules of thumb that we can employ. They're going to help us keep it in the right zone.
So this is where we cover 23.8. And Daniel has done several versions of this slide. It's kind of evolved and updated. But let me explain to you what 23.8 is that 20% down, we're forcing you to do that. That's going to keep you from going underwater with your vehicle. We're also going to say, pay this thing off in 3 years. That will also keep you ahead of that steep depreciation curve. And then we never want your car payments exceeding more than 8% of your gross income.
Right.
That's how it's going to keep you from getting out over your skis, buying more than you should afford. And that's why we have the last rule, which is If it's a luxury brand, if it's BMW, Mercedes, and I hate to say it, even Tesla, even though it's getting close with the way they're doing their cars, I want you to pay it same as cash in 1 year. That way you don't. Once again, I'm worried about lifestyle creep, where you're not funding your Roth, you're not funding maximizing your retirement plan, all those things. I don't want you faking life so you look good to your peers, but meanwhile you're rotting from the inside out by not saving for the future.
What you just said right there was so perfect, Brian. To prevent you from undermining your army of dollar bills, we actually added an additional rule, one more rule in there, that when it comes to buying a car, when it comes to paying for a car, you have to make sure that your monthly investments, the amount that you're saving on a monthly basis to those 401ks and Roth IRAs and so forth, is greater than your car payment. If you're not saving $500 a month for your future self, you do not need a car payment that is in excess of $500 a month. If you can stay in between those lines and do 23/8, you can both have an automobile that's going to be able to satisfy your needs, but also not sacrifice your soldiers in your army of dollar bill doing what they're supposed to do over the long term.
So, Bo, bring it full circle. If you exclude the big debt like mortgages, where are we at by the time we end our 30s?
So
average?
What we said is that the Gen Zs, their average debt load, not excluding mortgage, is about $11,000. For millennials, again, that's that age range that's from age 25 to 40. Their average debt load, excluding their mortgage, is about $27,000. That's credit cards, student loans, auto loans, other types of loans, is about $27,000.
Now, I'm fully expecting as you get older and you have more commitments in life, yes, debt is going to go up. I mean, truthfully, even for me, debt would continue to go up until I reached my 40s,
Sure.
And then it's steeply started going down. I understand those commitments, but what I'm hoping in the background, there better be assets that are also growing. Your army of dollar bills is way too powerful in your 20s and your 30s to ignore it. Make sure you are deferring gratification or taking a little bit of today to have that great, big, beautiful tomorrow in the future. I promise you, your 40, 50, 60-year-old self will thank you very generously in the future for making those sacrifices right now.
That's perfect, Brian. And you talk about your 40-year-old, you said your 40-year-old self will thank you, and you better have had something working in the background. Well, that's a perfect segue, because in your 40s, as you enter into this decade, this really is your moment of truth decade. Have you been walking the walk that you were supposed to be walking?